You know how sometimes the most significant power struggles, they happen not really with armies, but more with, like, words and policies?
Absolutely, yeah.
We seem to be smack dab in the middle of one right now. A really fascinating showdown between Harvard University and, well, the U.S. government.
It is. Think of it like a heavyweight bout,
Mm-hmm.
One side has precedent, tradition.
And the other side, they hold the purse strings. Billions of dollars worth, actually.
Yeah. What immediately grabs you is just the sheer audacity of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
One of the world's top universities openly defying the federal government's demands.
Right. It forces us to ask, how far can federal power actually go?
Yeah,
Especially when it sort of bumps up against the independence of our university.
exactly. That's the core question.
So our goal in this deep dive is really to unpack this whole situation. We're drawing from recent reports to understand, the specifics, what the Trump administration is demanding.
And why Harvard's pushing back so hard.
Exactly. At its heart, you've got the government basically saying, look, we're concerned about anti-Semitism on your campus, related to the Gaza war protests, and we think you're violating civil rights laws.
Title VI specifically.
Right. And Harvard's response, essentially, hold on, you can't dictate this to us. We have rights, constitutional rights.
And the money involved is just, well, staggering. We're talking potentially $9 billion in federal research funding on the line for Harvard.
$9 billion.
Oh.
Wow. And it's not just a threat, is it? The administration's already started to act.
That's right. They've begun freezing a pretty significant chunk. Reports say $2.2 billion in grants and around $60 million in contracts.
So, yeah, it's already happening. That's a serious move.
Definitely serious.
Okay,
Yeah.
So let's dig into the specifics then. The nitty-gritty. What exactly is the government asking Harvard to do? Because it sounds like it's more than just a vague suggestion to, do better.
Oh, it's much more than that. The reports detail a pretty extensive list. As we mentioned, the administration's stated reasons center on alleged anti-Semitism linked to the Gaza protests.
And potential violations of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Right, which, just as a reminder for listeners, basically bars discrimination based on race, color, or national origin in any program getting federal funds.
Okay. So stemming from that concern, what are the specific demands?
Well, first, they're asking for audits of academic programs and departments.
Audits. What does that entail?
Sounds quite deep. They apparently want to assess not just what's being taught, but also the viewpoints of students, faculty, and staff.
Wow, viewpoints. That sounds like the government wanting a very granular look inside Harvard's operations.
It certainly seems that way. And the scope is pretty broad. They're also asking for changes to Harvard's governance structure, how they hire people.
Governance too, okay?
And a big one, ending all diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. DEI.
Ending DEI completely.
That's the demand. And alongside that, ending any admissions or hiring practices that consider race, color, national origin, or, interestingly, proxies thereof.
Proxies thereof. That phrase really jumped out, doesn't it? Suggests they're looking beyond just explicit race considerations.
It does. It implies looking at factors that might indirectly correlate with race or origin.
Okay, what else is on the list? It keeps going.
It does. They want tougher discipline for protesters.
Tougher discipline.
Yes. And they're proposing screening international students, specifically looking for those deemed, quote, hostile to American values.
Screening for hostility to American values. That certainly raises, well, a lot of questions about academic freedom, the free exchange of ideas on campus.
Absolutely. Then there's a very specific demand. Ban face masks at Harvard.
Ban face masks. That seems targeted.
It appears to be a direct response to the pro-Palestinian protests where some participants have worn masks, yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
They also want Harvard to stop recognizing or funding student groups that endorse, and this is their wording, criminal activity, illegal violence, or illegal harassment.
Right, which, on the surface sounds reasonable enough, but the definition of endorse could be tricky, couldn't it?
Extremely tricky. Could supporting a cause where maybe some individuals acted unlawfully be seen as the whole group endorsing it? It's a potential gray area.
Definitely. And there's more.
Yes. The government is also calling for a White House-approved external body.
White House approved.
White House-approved. To audit viewpoint diversity on campus. And finally, implementing what they call merit-based admissions and hiring policies.
Merit-based, another term that can be interpreted in different ways. It's a really comprehensive, almost invasive set of demands trying to reshape how Harvard functions.
It really is.
Yeah.
And their justification, according to the report, boils down to this. Federal funding isn't an entitlement, it's an investment.
An investment by taxpayers.
Exactly. So they argue universities getting that money must uphold civil rights obligations. It frames the relationship very much around accountability tied directly to that funding.
Okay, so that lays out the administration's position pretty clearly. Now, let's flip to the other side. Harvard's response. President Garber, from what I read, didn't exactly mince words.
No, he certainly did not. His response was very strong, unequivocal. He stated these demands are, and I'm quoting here, unmoored from the law.
Unmoored from the law. Okay.
And he added that the university will not surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights. That's about as clear a rejection as you can get.
It really is. So Harvard's core argument is basically that the government is overstepping its legal authority.
Precisely. They argue the demands infringe on their fundamental rights, specifically citing the First Amendment, freedom of speech, association, and also other civil rights laws. They believe the administration is misapplying or stretching too far.
And Garber made a point about institutional autonomy, right?
Yes, he emphasized that no government, it doesn't matter which administration is in power, should be dictating what private universities teach, who they admit, who they hire, or even which subjects they choose to research.
That really strikes at the heart of academic freedom, doesn't it? The idea that universities need space to explore ideas without political interference.
It's central to their argument. And it's important to note, the reports highlight that Harvard isn't just dismissing the underlying concerns like anti-Semitism.
Right, they're saying they are addressing it.
Exactly. They claim they're actively working to combat it. They point to measures already taken. They also stress they're complying with the Supreme Court's ruling on race-conscious admissions and have programs trying to broaden intellectual diversity on campus.
So they're not saying the issues aren't real, but that the government's method is wrong.
That's the core of it. They're arguing that the government's very prescriptive, demanding approach isn't the appropriate or even lawful way to handle these complex issues.
Gerber's point seems to be, this is our responsibility as a community to fix our shortcomings and live up to our values, not through outside force.
Exactly. Not through, as he put it, external assertions of power backed by threats to funding. It's a fundamental clash over who controls decision-making within a private university.
And as we touched on briefly earlier, this isn't just about Harvard, is it? This is part of a wider pattern.
That's a really crucial piece of context. Harvard is reportedly just one among dozens of schools targeted by the administration with similar threats or enforcement actions regarding non-compliance with anti-discrimination rules.
Dozens. Okay, so it suggests a broader strategy concerning higher education.
It certainly seems that way.
And all this is happening despite, this long history of partnership between the government and universities, particularly in research, right? Going back decades.
Oh, absolutely. Since World War II, really. This partnership has been incredibly important. University research has driven so much American innovation. Think computers, AI, vaccines. The list goes on.
Huge breakthroughs. And there's a big economic impact too, isn't there?
Massive. One report cited, I think it was from United for Medical Research, found that every dollar the NIH invests in research generates something like $2.56 in economic activity.
That's a pretty significant return on investment for the public.
It really is. Which is why you hear experts like Daniel Gross at Duke University calling the potential withdrawal of this funding catastrophic for American innovation.
Catastrophic. And we heard similar concerns from the dean of Harvard Medical School, George Daley.
Yes, Daley emphasized this long, beneficial partnership, especially in biomedicine. He even pointed to Joel Haebner's recent Breakthrough Prize for work on GLP-1 drugs as a concrete example of what this collaboration achieves.
The weight loss drugs, right, huge impact.
Exactly. And Daley's worry is that cutting this funding is, in his words, self-defeating and injurious to the economy and to U.S. leadership, especially in critical fields like biotech and pharma, where we're competing fiercely with, say, China.
So the stakes are much higher than just a dispute between one university and the government. It touches research, the economy, global competitiveness.
Absolutely. And at its core, like we said, it really feels like a test of the limits of government power versus the independence of U.S. universities.
Which means this could end up in court.
That seems highly likely. The report suggests Harvard itself might sue, challenging the administration's actions. And we already know a faculty group has filed a legal challenge.
So this could go all the way, maybe even the Supreme Court.
It's certainly possible. And the outcome could set major precedents for the government-university relationship for years, even decades to come.
It's interesting. Some commentators are framing this whole thing as like part of a longer conservative Maybe skepticism isn't strong enough, war against academia, drawing parallels to Reagan, even McCarthyism.
That framing is definitely out there. Some experts quoted in the reports argue that the Trump administration's approach is significantly more intense. Some even use the term authoritarian playbook.
That's strong language.
It is. The argument essentially is that while anti-Semitism is the stated concern, the real goal might be broader each hero, aiming to exert more control over the intellectual climate, the sort of ideological environment within universities.
Is there any evidence supporting that view?
Well, proponents might point to the situation at Columbia University. Initially, they seemed to make some concessions to similar demands.
But then they changed their tune.
Yes. Reportedly, after seeing Harvard take such a defiant stand, Columbia adopted a more resistant tone itself. It suggests Harvard's actions might be emboldening others.
And the pressure isn't just about research funding, right? Didn't the administration also mention Harvard's tax status?
Yes, that threat was floated too, reviewing Harvard's tax-exempt status, which would be financially absolutely massive for them.
Huge. And now Harvard has that enormous endowment, something like $53 billion.
A massive cushion, yes.
But they still rely heavily on federal money for the actual research activities, right? The day-to-day science.
Exactly. The endowment helps, but it doesn't replace billions in annual research grants and contracts. It's a very complex financial picture.
It's interesting, there was even a suggestion from Hillsdale College, which is a conservative school, that famously doesn't take federal funds.
Right. They suggested Harvard could just forego the federal money too.
Which sounds simple, maybe principled from one perspective, but given the scale of Harvard's research.
It seems highly improbable.
Yeah.
And potentially incredibly damaging to their research mission, and maybe to U.S. science overall.
On the flip side, you have prominent figures supporting Harvard's stance. I saw former President Obama weighed in.
Yes, he described the administration's actions as a, quote, ham-handed attempt to stifle academic freedom. So, strong support there.
And interestingly, even within Harvard, the Harvard Republican Club called for a resolution urging a return to American principles, which suggests, it's not a monolithic view even on campus.
Absolutely, and the concern is tangible. There was actually a protest in Cambridge supporting Harvard's position.
Right. And we mentioned the lawsuit from the American Association of University Professors.
Yes, the AAUP.
Yeah.
They're challenging the funding cuts directly, arguing the administration didn't follow the proper procedures required under Title VI before imposing these restrictions. So procedural challenges as well as substantive ones.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. When we step back and look at the whole picture, what we're really seeing is this major clash playing out. Harvard digging in its heels against the administration's demands.
And the government responding by turning off the taps on billions in vital research funding. It's a high-stakes standoff.
And the principles involved are just fundamental, aren't they? Academic freedom, university independence.
The proper role of government oversight, and, critically important, how we effectively combat discrimination, like anti-Semitism, without undermining those other principles. It's a difficult balance.
It really makes you think about the long game here, doesn't it? I mean, what are the potential long-term consequences? If this escalates, what does it mean for American higher education, for scientific innovation down the road?
Exactly. How does this redefine that delicate balance between getting federal dollars and maintaining the autonomy universities need to function effectively as centers of learning and discovery?
And maybe, what does this whole episode reveal about our current political climate? Its growing reach into institutions like universities that maybe felt a bit more insulated before.
It's definitely a situation that raises profound questions. It encourages us all, I think, to consider the multiple perspectives here and the potential for really significant changes in higher education, depending on how this plays out. It's certainly a story we'll need to keep watching.
So with that in mind, we want to say thank you for being with us, and we'll catch you on the next one.